Content over everything!
I mean, look, just look at what Brexit.
What are elections for then? What are elections for then? Sorry? What are elections for then if you're going to choose who you
Just look at the example of Brexit. The businesses are against
Democracy in the broad sense, and I understand what you mean, but in the precise sense I'm trying to present it, it's not.
I mean, I just gave you an example. Hitler and Stalin is referendums. Right? You rejected a monarchy, you rejected a republic, and now you advocate for democracy that's not governed by the mechanism of majority rule. You just did. You said all of those things. You said that Brexit.
When did I say that?
Just then. Okay, I'll ask you then. Is democracy, the mechanism of democracy, defined by majority rule, 51-49 wins the day? Is that it?
That's part of democracy.
Tell me the other part.
The other part, like I said, is face-to-face communal deliberation. This is the thing
That's
that
the
we just
ongoing
ignore.
process that we have all the time. It doesn't
No, we don't. Was there any deliberation of the Brexit vote?
Tell you what, the Remainers are going there, continually churning it through as they did in the Lisbon Treaty in Ireland.
The fact is, there was no face-to-face deliberation at the neighbourhood assembly level. There was no. There were no
Everybody was talking in the bus and every place where there was interface. This was the most widely discussed. And as you just said, all three of the main parties, right? They all were in favour of it. The media were all in favour of it, apart from 2 or 3 newspapers. And every single thing was in favour of it. Even Barack Obama was in favour of it. Everybody was brought in, and they voted to leave. Now, would you accept that as democracy?
Not in the precise sense.
Are you going to leave it for...
Not in the precise sense. In the way that
would
the
you
word
challenge
democracy,
the decision?
In the way the word democracy is used,
would you
I understand
challenge,
what that
would
means.
you challenge the decision to change it?
What do you mean? Would I challenge it?
You know, would you say we should have another referendum?
I'm not here to.
As a Democrat, would you?
No, I wouldn't personally. But that's not.
Well, that's good. I thought you would have.
That's not me as someone who's believing in direct democracy, right? That's not what I'm here to talk about. It's not.
Yeah. Could I ask you? Would you be pro-European?
Listen, I don't feel strongly about it either way. I really don't. I voted to remain, but partly because I'm worried that Britain is going to come under more of the fold of American power now, which is much more dangerous.
Would you be in favour of unelected bureaucrats?
Unelected bureaucrats
who make the policies that are voted on.
Right. Yeah, I'm not in favour of that generally. As a vision of a really truly free society, I wouldn't want to have any bureaucrats deciding how I live.
Yeah,
of course. Whether they're in Parliament or whether they're in Brussels.
Would you accept the outcome of the democratic thing?
Such a trivial issue. We're threatened by nuclear war and climate catastrophe, and yet this is the thing that predominates in most people's minds.
What, Brexit?
Most English men and women obsess over the Brexit question when they're far more serious issues.
No, we were talking about democracy, and you said that you're a Democrat, and all I'm doing is trying to get you to say, would you accept the democratic outcome of the referendum? And with no qualms, no trying to bring it.
If by democratic you're using it in the general sense of having free and fair elections.
The most natural sense of the term.
That's not. Again, it's not the most natural sense.
For most people around here, it would.
So just because everybody uses a word in a certain way doesn't make it a useful way of using that word. Just because everyone uses that word democracy to describe what is technically a monarchy with republican
majority rule is what we're.
That's not that's not the definition of democracy.
Okay, can I hold you there? Majority rule is not the definition of democracy.
In the sense that I'm using the word democracy, there's much more to it than majority rule.
Yeah, but in order to have this democracy you're talking about, it is possible. But you have to have a highly educated population.
No, to answer that point.
Well, we don't have.
To answer that point, no, you don't. You don't. You need a population who's willing to exercise their rationality and learn through the process of participating in democracy. You can only learn to be a truly democratic as a person if you participate in the democratic process. And participating in the democratic process is not chatting about Brexit on a bus and then going to tick a box. All right. There's much more to democracy than voting in referenda, voting for elected representatives. And it's much more.
Tell me the
much more.
Tell me the much more.
I've just given you an outline of it. For people who haven't heard what we've been talking about, real democracy as I see it, in the precise sense, is when at the local neighbourhood, village level, you have an assembly open to everybody living in that area, where they can come and make decisions about their neighbour face to face as a community. And yes, they use majority rule, but that is not the definition of the system, right? There's also space for free speech.
Definition of democracy.
There's also space for free speech, so that the minority can try and persuade the majority to take their position. They always have that opportunity.
That's why there's cycles of elections and cycles of times where this comes into
There's more to
all
it.
the mechanisms
There's more to it than that. It's not a nation state. I must make that very clear.
What is it?
It's not a real democracy as I see it is not a nation state. Because a state, by definition, you're electing other people to make decisions for you. That's not democratic. It might be a republican institution, and the parliament in many ways is a republican institution. It's not a democratic institution. You're electing others to make decisions for you. You're not participating in the decision making yourself, right? And this is partly why the left has failed in providing really radically different radical solution. They're not creating a real alternative that I'm trying to propose. I'm a leftist. I'm very worried about trends towards the far right, and I think one of the reasons we're moving towards a more authoritarian society.
You would be more in favour of distribution of wealth.
We actually lack participation in the democratic process.
Sure.
But people feel disempowered, especially young men. They feel angry, and they move towards more authoritarian ideologies, whether they're Stalinism or fascism. They start to see that as some kind of hope. They pin their hope on a charismatic individual who might save them, right? That tends to be what happens. And the fact is, this is partly because we don't have real democracy. Like I said, will you meet with your fellow human being in face-to-face democratic assemblies?
Yes.
I'm speaking here of something akin, not the same as, something akin to the Paris sections during the French Revolution. Right?
Yeah.
Where Paris was divided up into sections, and there was an assembly in each one.
Yeah.
The Parisians could come, albeit they were just men, because feminism hadn't taken hold then. They were just men. And they could decide how they wanted the section to be run in Paris. I'm talking about the New England town meetings before America had its revolution. I'm talking about there's examples throughout history.
What you're saying is you're identifying the smallest molecule in the thing that governs mankind and saying this is the most valuable one. Okay, and you said that you're quite left-wing. Right?
Oh, I'm on the left.
Yeah,
sure.
Okay, so you would be more in a more egalitarian, more distributist kind of thing. And you live where?
I live in Kensington and Chelsea.
Right, I'm actually on housing benefit, and I'm living. I need help. Will you help me?
How do you need help?
I need financial help.
My brother and my sister are on benefits. I know a lot about the system.
Okay, but you live actually in Westminster.
No, I don't live in Westminster.
Oh, sorry, I thought you did.
Kensington, Chelsea is not Westminster. They're separate boroughs.
Okay.
I mean, London in this part of
London. Maybe I
stereotyped
you to be a wealthy
and also,
person from a wealthy family.
Just because I happen to be from a middle class background doesn't mean I can't have left-wing ideals.
Doesn't mean you can't distribute some of that down.
Are you asking for charity? Are you asking
I would
to give
love.
money?
I need.
I don't have any money. I don't have a penny to my name. Myself as an individual. I can, if you want, I can introduce you to my mother, and you can ask her. She'll say the same thing. She has hardly anything.
That's another downward
If
spiral.
you're asking for charity, I'm happy to introduce you to my family. If it's that desperate.
Could they help me?
Listen, I don't know. You have to ask them. I have no money myself. I literally.
Okay.
I have no money. Not a single penny.
Sure.
I'm waiting for my passport from the Irish passport.
Well, you know what? No. I enjoyed what you were saying. I can see where you're coming from, but I still haven't been able to identify how any of us, by following your model, our lives would be enriched, where maybe economically we'd be better, maybe it'd be more efficient, etc., etc. So far from being radical, I think you're the opposite of being radical, because the results of what you're proposing, if you can't show me how they would radically alter my state, it's just whistling in the wind.
You said you're on benefits, right?
Yeah.
Right, so we have our welfare state is now moving, or it's moved towards a system where you divide people up into the deserving and the undeserving poor, right? Where there's a much more emphasis on the strivers and the skivers. People like guys standing. Well, there's a lot more means testing for one thing. Now, if you had to say a neighborhood assembly in your area, even without any legislative power, just the power to meet and discuss moral issues, they could actually put a lot of pressure, moral pressure, on the state.
Yeah.
If there were enough of these kind of assemblies to change that and make it slightly better. I'm not one of these people that comes to Speaker's Corner, calls for real democracy and says we've got to go out now and start a revolution. But one thing I know, British people are so propagandized that they can't. They don't. For example, most people equate democracy with referendums in this country, or majority rule. That in itself is problematic. But what we can do is...
I don't think most people would understand what you're talking about, no disrespect.
Okay. No, I know.
Because if you were to say, I'm a Democrat, and you would all benefit from true democracy, but you also then said, well, it doesn't just mean majority rule, and there's far more to it than that. I'm not... it's like... It's blah. I don't understand. I don't quite understand the radical... So if you're going to give a radical message, I should be like going, flip! Why didn't we think of that? But But what you've done is use a microscope on the current on the system, and you've actually got the intensity further and further, and said that's really what we need. So what we'll do, we'll put that up there, get rid of that, and we. But I think it's just gonna. You've lost me. I can't.
You lost me. I don't know.
Yeah. Give it in two sentences what you're advocating that's radical.
I'm proposing that a committed group of revolutionaries meets and forms with local branches all over the UK, a democratically run organisation itself, meets to try and move Britain from a nation state to a real democracy. A nation state influenced by capitalism to a real democracy. Not by seizing the power of the state, as Leninists would have it, but by actually taking power in local government, by running candidates in elections at local level, who will then themselves go on to create local assemblies where citizens can meet, regardless of how educated they are. And
as we said before, so it's
process.
really join your parish council and then join your county council, which are basically they form the same function of exactly what you're saying.
They don't form it.
They do.
Because like I just said, for one thing, there's a nation state, which actually makes most of the decisions, right?
Yeah.
So they don't actually have most of the power you're talking about.
No, on a local level they do.
But the thing is, these assemblies at the
that's
local
what you were
level will be able to
talking
comment and pass resolutions on national issues
That's
and
what
international issues.
they do
For
that.
example, what I actually came to Speaker's Corner today was not to talk about communalism, to talk about the Israel question, right? And how Israel has been savagely killing 27 people in cold blood, right?
Well, I tell you what, get up on your soapbox. Yeah. Anyway, thank you for that. That was
Thank you very much for that question.
it's
very,
interesting.
very worthwhile questions. And this is what Speaker's Corner is about. Like I just said, even though a lot of people at Speaker's Corner are defending crazy imaginaries, they're doing it in a rational, reasonable way. They're trying to provide evidence. That's the hallmark of reason, right? They're trying to persuade with evidence. They're not just assuming that you believe what they believe. So, yeah, I want to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict. Hands up if you understand the Israel-Palestine conflict. You understand it? Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. It's very confusing, and the media have kept it that way intentionally, right? They haven't offered the historical context that's necessary to understand how the conflict is unfolding, right? Quite often you see in the media an obsession with the hot action on the ground. Oh, these Palestinians just being killed by sniper rifles, right? But they don't offer the background to that. Or, they'll talk it like in 2006 when that Israeli soldier got captured. They'll talk about that action. But they won't talk about the background before that, about how a doctor and his brother have been kidnapped. A Palestinian doctor and his brother have been kidnapped before. And that's very likely that kidnapping of that IDF soldier was very likely a retaliation of that. They tend not to mention that. And they tend to describe Israeli terrorism as a case of extremism or maybe vigilantism, right? When an Israeli nationalist goes in and bombs part of Palestine. But then when Palestinians do it, it's terrorism. There's the way the debate is framed is very, very complicated and very tricky. And you need to take the time, if you want to understand this conflict, to read authors like Ilan Pappé, to read authors like Noam Chomsky, for example, or Norman Finkelstein. If you really want to understand the conflict, you can't look to the media. You can get the latest action, but you can't understand the media.
How far back are we supposed to go?
Sorry?
How far back are we supposed to go in terms of years?
Well, if you could say that the Zionist project began in the late 19th century, you could sort of look at that history and where it came from. The late 19th century. You could start there. You can look at how Zionism unfolded and what was the initial aim of Zionism. What were the debates having within that? Look, some Zionists wanted to, keep the Palestinians and exploit them. Some of them wanted just to kick them out, right? Some of them really were genuine socialists, and some of them just turned to socialism because it offered the kind of cooperation necessary to keep out angry Palestinians.
It's already a bit of an arse just to get people to go back to 1947, really.
Well,
and then get even further than that, it would be even more of a stretch.
To question the idea of Israel, ask what the idea of Israel is. And is there such a thing as post-Zionism? Is there something after that kind of nationalism? Are there possibilities that go beyond nationalist struggle to create real freedom in that part of the Middle East? I think there are. I think it's worth having a debate and getting Israeli, Palestinian activists and artists and so on to meet in Israel and Britain, America and all over the world to discuss what are the alternative possibilities. Is there is there a kind of Zionism that's maybe a post-Zionism? Goes beyond just having a nation state, having real democracy and freedom?
I don't think there is. The reason I say this is that so many atrocities have been committed by the Jews.
I can't hear you, Eric. You've got to speak up.
I don't think there is. The reason is that so many atrocities have been committed on the Palestinians that the Israelis themselves feel guilt. And
I can't hear you, sorry. Can you speak up a bit more?
Put your earphones.
You're speaking very quietly. I can't hear you.
You're not raising your voice.
Yeah, you're just sort of, you're coming closer, but you're not speaking up.
The reason... Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Okay. No, look. The reason that there won't be a post-Zionism is the fact that so many atrocities have been committed by the Jews on the Palestinians, and the Palestinians, are obviously against it. We've got certain,
I can't hear you. Sorry, you got to speak up, Eric. I could hear most of it just until you started.
Well, I can't bother because I can't get that high, and you'd hear perfectly easily if that wasn't there. You only want it higher, so it's, you can record it.
I'm not working with you. I mean, I know these guys, but I'm not trying to get them to record you.
I'm having difficulties hearing you, and I'm next to you.
I can hear you. Yeah, what's to say is that this is the reason he wants me to kind of.
No, it's not the reason I want to. The reason I want you to speak up is so I can hear you, not so you can get your voice heard by the mic.
Okay.
Your voice can be already heard by the mic.
We really can't hear you.
He's right next to you and he can't hear you. I want to hear your ideas. I'm interested. You just got to speak up.
Look. So much. The reason that it won't alter is that so much blood has been spilled. The Israelis have committed a whole load of atrocities, and they're not going to kind of they feel guilty. They're not going to feel okay about it, and that will encourage the next lot of atrocities.
So you're saying that the reason we can't have a post-Zionist movement is because so many atrocities have already been committed by the Israeli army?
Yes. Look.
Is that true? Really?
Look. 2 days ago, there was a peaceful demonstration at the Gaza border. 6 people were killed.
كل مكان بيجيبوا حمار بيصور في كل حته جايبين واحد بيمثل صح يا غبي صور يا حمار صور.
Hi guys. This might be of interest to you. We're talking about Israel and Palestine. We're talking about the recent atrocities.
You understand Palestine?
Do I understand Palestine? Not entirely, no.
Why?
But I know that.
Listen. You Jews or Christian?
I'm an atheist. I'm an atheist.
No God.
No God. Yeah.
No God.
I don't believe in God. Yeah.
You don't understand name you?
Sorry?
What's your name?
My name is Kyle.
You understand name you?
I understand my name.
You
Yeah.
understand father? What's your name?
I understand my father's name. Yeah.
The mother?
Yeah, I do.
You understand no good? You understand father and the mother and the name, and do you not understand Allah?
I understand the idea of God. I think I understand it, but I don't believe that it's a real. I think it's an imaginary
You live in
supernatural.
hell after?
I don't believe that there's a real hell.
Where do you live?
Where do I live?
Yeah.
I live in London. I want to talk about the attack on the Palestinian people. 27 Palestinian protesters have been shot by the Israeli army.
27
Sniper
in
rifles.
Palestine?
Some of them have been shot in the back.
You?
Right? Now the media is concentrated a
Palestine
lot.
all day.
Palestinian
All day.
All day.
All day. Jews kill only Palestine. All day. Anytime. Children and old and lady and daughter and everything.
I'm here to just say that I think
Why?
if you care about the plight of the Palestinian
Why?
you will research the historical context of it. Instead of just reading about the killings in the newspaper, research the historical context of people who've had their land taken away from them by a colonialist project. That's what I think. That's what I think Zionism has become. It was a colonialist project up until the 1940s, and then now it's just a nationalist one. And I think if you want to understand it, you need to read people like Ilan Pappé. Ilan Pappé is an Israeli historian at the University of Exeter. He gives a very good historical account
with respect
of the conflict.
And
Britain should stop selling weapons to Israel. You should write to your MP or your local councillor if you're British. Ask them, what do you think about Britain selling weapons to a human rights abusing country illegally occupying part of the Middle East?
What weapons do we sell, just a matter of interest?
I don't know what weapons we sell exactly. But I know we do sell weapons. Many millions of pounds worth. They're one of the major markets.
You're saying you know that, you can't state what they are.
Just because I don't know what weapons they're selling, and because I don't know how much they're selling, doesn't mean that there aren't weapons being sold. I know there are weapons being sold.
But are you aware that Israel exports weapons to the United States? They produce so many of their own.
So what? So what's your point?
Their point is that they don't need our weapons.
Oh, they are buying our weapons, that's for sure. They're buying British weapons.
But I asked
you, in Saudi Arabia.
But I asked you what
the Saudi government is buying British weapons so it can continue the ongoing human rights disaster in Yemen. They're buying British weapons and British training, and British bombs. It's not just Israel. Saudi Arabia is also a human rights abusing state.
For Trump and Khomeini, not Saudi Arabia.
Sorry?
It's for Trump. Only Trump for money.
You want me to vote for Trump?
Money, Trump, and England.
What are you saying? Sorry.
England here, problem for everybody.
A problem in England is a problem for everybody.
For everybody. For Palestine.
Okay.
You know?
So what's the problem?
What's the problem?
So can you describe
Jews before here. And
Jews
America and here and here and here. England give me all rubbish. Jews and go Palestine.
I don't think it's
before only Palestine.
I'm not saying Jewish
not
people
Jews.
Are people. I'm not anti-Semitic. I'm not against Jewish
Any
people.
Jews not have country.
What is he saying? Sorry.
He's saying the problem comes when the Jews got sent to Palestine.
They didn't get sent. They didn't get sent to Palestine. A lot of Jews willingly went to Palestine in the late 19th
Only
century.
here.
Sorry?
Only here mafia.
Only here is a mafia.
Yes.
What kind
for
of,
everybody.
What are you talking about? What kind of mafia?
Mafia for money.
Where? Who?
For any country.
You're talking about the UK government?
سرقوا العالم كله. Any country. Any country.
I think what this gentleman is getting at is that the United Kingdom colludes with radical Islam and also colludes with human rights abusing countries.
Tony Blair and listen. Tony Blair and the Bush.
I don't understand what you're saying. Sorry.
Tony Blair
and Bush, right?
You don't understand Tony Blair?
Helped to commit one of the worst crimes of the century.
Tony Blair.
The Iraq War was a crime
George W. Bush.
Sorry? And George W. Bush. I understand what you're saying, but what are you trying to say? What's your point? What's your point? Are you angry at
Tony Blair? Tony Blair.
Okay.
And George W. Bush.
What about them?
Kill how many million in Iraq?
Many people. Maybe more than a million. More than a million.
Why?
Why? I think it's more than just...
You not ask him?
It's more than just oil, I know that much.
You ask him after kill. Sorry. Tony Blair. Sorry. 5 million kill and after ask sorry.
I think I understand what he's saying, but I don't agree with everything.
And all money.
It's not 5 million people that have died in Iraq. It's not 5 million.
And the money.
It wasn't 5 million. I think there was, I don't know the exact figures, but it was more than 1 million dead from the Iraq War, and maybe more than 1 million refugees. Even if it was only 100,000 or even 10,000, that would be a human rights abuse and disaster, a crime against humanity that the UK government has committed. All right? That would be a human rights abuse and a human rights disaster. And I just gave the example of Saudi Arabia and how Britain is selling them weapons, the Saudi government, so they continue that humanitarian disaster, blowing up hospitals and schools with British bombs. And it's the same in Israel. We're supporting a regime by selling them weapons that are being used to kill innocent civilians. Support, what do you mean by support Palestine?
Are you pro-Palestinian?
What do you mean by that?
like acknowledge that what Israel is doing for the Palestinians unjust?
Yeah, I do think that. Yes.
So, do you believe in a two-state solution?
I personally, I was born in South Africa, right? And I think there's a lot of analogies between South Africa and Israel. In fact, in many ways, Israel is worse than South Africa in terms of its apartheid, right? But I think, to be honest, it would be better to have a one-state solution, and then they can have some kind of civil rights struggle like the Black South Africans had for the whole of Israel and Palestine. They could have a one-state setup, and then they can work using non-violent action. I think it should be non-violent action because that is the most effective. I don't know these questions. I'm not going to pronounce on questions like this because I've never been to Israel or Palestine. I don't know much about the culture, but I know enough to know that it's a violent regime that shouldn't be supported by the British.
Well, I did go.
I live in Britain. I'm not actually primarily criticizing Israel. I'm here today to criticize the British government for supporting the Israeli regime. I can go on at Speaker's Corner and criticize Russia, America, Israel, Saudi Arabia. I'm more interested in my own country and the crimes my own government have committed, and I want to stop that first and foremost. But yeah, I think a one-state solution where there can be a civil rights struggle, a non-violent civil rights struggle by the Palestinians, would be a better solution than a two-state one.
I did visit Israel and Palestine 2 years ago, and from what I saw and people who I spoke to, I think a one-state solution would just not happen. There's so much animosity between everybody there, including like the youngest kids you see in the West Bank. They all know somebody who's either been killed or arrested by an Israeli, and they're never going to live with Israelis as neighbors.
The same was said about South Africa. A lot of black people said the same about South Africa. They were so angry at the apartheid regime, the white nationalist regime.
There's still a lot of hostility.
There is racism and hostility and violence. I'm not saying there isn't, but I'm saying that there's an end in sight, and whether it's a two-state or one-state solution, I think there is hope. Look at like I just gave the example of South Africa. Decades-long racist apartheid regime, eventually it got toppled. Now, South Africa is not perfect today. There are a lot of problems in South Africa, namely capitalist exploitation.
But I did also take
black people that live in the slums.
Yeah, there's slums and many horrible living conditions. But it's better than it was before, and I think Israel can have a similar. Again, I don't like nation states. I think we should have a more democratic way of running society than nation states. Nation states concentrate a lot of power into a few hands, whether they're so-called democracies or tyrannies. Either way, they're not that democratic. But it'd be better. It'd be a stepping stone to creating something better. I'm not a Palestinian nationalist.
No, of course,
I'm not a nationalist at all. The plight of the Palestinian people should be defended not on ethnic or nationalist grounds, just because they're human beings, first and foremost, like anybody else. They're human beings. That man who got shot in the back by a sniper after he was walking away from that fence, right? The fact that they were even shooting live rounds at civilians for touching a fence, right? And burning tires, right? Shooting live rounds at civilians doing that.
What would you recommend? What's the solution?
Well, I'm asking everybody here today, if they have a local councillor or an MB they know, to write to the MB and ask them, why is Britain selling weapons to the Israeli regime? And should we reconsider our alliance with Israel?
The Balfour Agreement?
Sorry?
The Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration.
Oh yeah, I'm also asking, I'm asking British, especially British people, including myself, to go and research the historical context of the crisis. I asked, about 10 minutes ago, I asked how many people understand the Israel-Palestine conflict, and asked them to put their hand up. One man here facetiously put his hand up, but I don't think he does understand it. But he put his hand up. Most people don't understand it, because the media concentrates on individual atrocities, right? Like the recent attack, the recent savage, cold-blooded shooting of these civilians. They concentrate on that because that's the hot action, right? But they never provide the historical context that's necessary to understanding how it got there in the first place. And very often that leads to a bias where, the Israelis are maybe a bit extreme, or maybe there's hardly ever discussion of the fact that they're violating international law, that they're creating an apartheid state, a de facto apartheid state. There's very little discussion of that, and it's always hardly ever are they described as the terrorists when they're the predominant terrorists.
That's why I think the media is controlled by Zionists.
I don't think the media is controlled by Zionists. I disagree with you on that. I don't believe that at all.
I think it is. I think Zionism.
I would agree with you.
I think there's a bias in favor of There's a bias in the British media, including the BBC and the Guardian, in favor of Israeli violence. but they're not controlled by Zionists. All right. To say there's some kind of conspiracy, and again, I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't think there's problems with being Jewish. It's like being Palestinian. It's just another ethnicity.
They're both Semitic, actually.
Jewish people and
they're both Semitic, actually.
Right. Exactly. I mean, ethnicity and national identity is very complicated, and I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the violence that's going on. Yeah, historical context.
Of course, I agree with you up to a certain extent. The Zionists hasn't, a control on media. But I just want to ask you a different question. If Britain don't sell, if they don't want to sell these weapons to these people, Palestine or Israel or whoever, then who is going to be Britain's customers to buy these weapons?
Oh yeah, no.
Britain
I had a discussion.
Does it have to?
Britain have to sell.
This
BAE is going to lose a few jobs. Raytheon's going to lose a few jobs. That's what they say.
Yes, it's not only Britain.
Does it really matter when you've got people dying?
Right. Not only Britain, even in America or Russia, every single year they are spending literally 400.
And when UKIP MP is going to give a speech.
When he says that the son of
Yeah. Hello. All right. Oh, hello. All right.
Content over everything. From now to Melanie.
Man, say it straight. Man, don't listen to BBC. Man, don't listen to
Oh, he's complaining that he's been shouted at. Every week I come here and get shouted at.
Yeah. You guys finish professional.
So,
we're not in the playground.
answer the question.
Okay. Calm down.
Hurry up. Why are you stalling, Ali?
Stop stalling, bro.
You're stalling, Ali.
You're stopping me. You're stopping me.
Yeah, stop waffling.
You're stopping me.
So answer the question.
Hurry up.
Calm down.
Before Christmas.
All right. Wait, I think he's going to answer the question that I asked.